So there I was, standing in the middle of the city park, my bike completely dead in the water, or rather, dead on the grass. This wasn't just a minor hiccup. The chain was off, the gears were jammed, and I was sweating more than I care to admit because I'd already been trying to fix it for the last 20 minutes. I'm not exactly mechanically inclined, which is why I was cursing myself for deciding to take this shortcut through the park to get home after work. I was halfway between giving up and calling a cab when this guy rolled up on his own bike, all casual and confident like he belonged in a bike shop or something. He looked like he just stepped out of one of those indie coffee shop ads. Messy dark hair, a leather jacket with some grease stains on the sleeves, and these bright green eyes that immediately distracted me from my bike disaster. "Need a hand?" he asked, already hopping off his bike and walking over without waiting for an answer. Now, I'm usually pretty awkward when strangers just jump into my life like that, but there was something about the way he smiled, like he genuinely wanted to help, not just make small talk or hit on me, though, well, maybe that came later. Yeah, I think my chain slipped off. The smell of oil and metal filled the air, oddly comforting in a way I didn't expect. For a few minutes, neither of us said much. Just the quiet clicks and clanks of the bike being worked on. I found myself watching him more than my bike, noticing the way his hands moved with confidence and care, how his brow furrowed just a bit when something didn't click right. There was a sort of quiet intensity to it, like he was in his element, and honestly, it was kinda hot. "All right, try it now," he said finally, standing up and wiping his hands on his jeans in a way that left dark smudges right on the fabric. I gave the pedals a spin, and to my shock, the chain stayed put. The gears shifted smoothly, and my bike was basically alive again. "Wow, thanks," I said, genuinely impressed. "You're like a miracle worker or something." He grinned, still a little greasy but definitely proud. "I work in a bike shop downtown. I guess this is just part of the job." And then came the part one didn't see coming. He looked up at me, a little nervous maybe, his smile faltering just the tiniest bit. "So, since I've already gotten my hands dirty fixing your bike, how about I make it up to you with coffee sometime? As a thank you?" There it was, the invitation, hanging in the air between us. I was caught off guard, looking at this guy with his grease-stained jeans and hopeful eyes, and honestly, I wanted to say yes before I even realized I was thinking it, but instead I just laughed a little, shaking my head like, yeah, this is definitely going to be a story worth telling. And then I said, "Yeah, I'd like that." He smiled again, that same easy grin, and wiped his hands one more time on his jeans, leaving fresh smudges. "Cool, I'm Lucas, by the way." "Jake," I said, holding out my hand, which he shook firmly, even though my own was a bit shaky. Part nerves, part adrenaline from the whole bike rescue. "So, coffee." "Tomorrow after work?" Lucas asked, still standing next to me, his bike leaning casually against a nearby tree. I glanced down at my own ride, still humming quietly, then back at him. "Sounds good. There's a little cafe not far from here, the one with the sourdough toast that everyone raves about." Lucas nodded. "I've been meaning to check that place out." We exchanged numbers, and with a quick "see you tomorrow," he swung back on his bike and took off, leaving me standing there, kinda stunned by how easy that felt. Like, one minute I'm flailing over a broken chain in the park, and the next I've got a date with a grease-stained bike guy. The rest of the night, I replayed the whole thing in my head, half smiling, half wondering if I was overthinking it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something good was starting. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The next evening, I found myself standing outside that cafe. Lucas mentioned, my bike propped against the wall and my heart doing things I wasn't expecting. I was way more nervous than I'd thought I'd be. Like, this was just coffee, right? But then again, maybe it wasn't just coffee. Lucas was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner table with his jacket draped over the back of the chair. He looked up, caught my eye, and gave that same grin that made me feel like everything was suddenly easier. "Hey, Jake," he said, standing up to pull out my chair. "Hey," I replied, sliding into the seat and trying to calm the weird flutter in my chest. We ordered coffee and sat back, the conversation starting a little awkward but quickly finding its rhythm. Turns out Lucas was from just outside the city and had moved here a couple of years ago to work at the bike shop. He was passionate about cycling in a way I hadn't really met before. and watching him talk about his job lit something in me, like I was seeing a part of him that was alive and real. "So," I said, after he told me about a charity ride the shop was organizing next month, "do you ride a lot yourself?" Lucas laughed, running a hand through his messy hair. "Yeah, I'm kind of obsessed. It's not just a job, it's how I clear my head." I nodded, thinking about my own bike, how it was more than just a way to get around. It was a kind of freedom. I said, I never really thought much about biking beyond the "it gets me places" part. But watching you fix my chain yesterday, I kind of got it. Lucas smiled, eyes softening. "Maybe I can show you some routes sometime." I felt my cheeks heat up because, damn, that sounded nice. The cafe started to fill up with the evening crowd, but it felt like we were in our own little bubble. We talked about music, movies, some stupid embarrassing moments from high school. I told him about the time I tried to bake a cake and almost set the kitchen on fire. He laughed so hard, his green eyes sparkling, and I realized I was already starting to care about this guy in a way that surprised me. When we finally stepped back outside, the city lights were just flickering on, and the air had that cool, fresh feeling you get right after sunset. So, Lucas said, like he was testing the waters, "Do you want to do this again sometime?" I smiled, feeling a genuine warmth spread through me. "Yeah, I'd like that." He grinned, then reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear, fingers lingering just a moment longer than necessary. As he leaned in, the moment felt electric, like everything was suddenly sharper, more vivid. But just before our lips met, a sudden honking from a passing car snapped me back to reality. We both laughed, a little embarrassed but happy in that easy, imperfect way. "Maybe next time," Lucas said with a wink. "Definitely," I replied, already looking forward to it. As I rode home that night, the city felt different, brighter somehow. And the broken bike in the park? That felt like the best thing that had happened to me in a long time. Over the next few weeks, Lucas and I fell into this easy routine that honestly caught me off guard. We'd meet after work, sometimes for coffee, sometimes to just ride our bikes around the quieter parts of the city. It was nice, like rediscovering the city through someone else's eyes. He knew all these little hidden spots, a mural painted on the side of an old warehouse, a tiny park with the best sunset views, even a hole-in-the-wall diner that served the kind of pancakes you dream about. One evening, we were sitting on the edge of the park's fountain. Bikes leaned against the bench, feet dangling over the water. It was just after a long ride, and the sky was painted in shades of purple and orange. I don't know why, but I felt like I could say anything to him. So I did. "Can I be honest?" I asked, chewing on the inside of my cheek. Lucas looked over, eyebrows raised, waiting. I've never really done this before. Like, dating. I mean, I've had crushes and stuff, but this feels different. He smiled, that warm, genuine smile that made my heart do this weird flip. Different how? Like, I don't feel like I'm pretending or trying to be someone else. With you, it's easy to be me. There was a pause, the kind that feels like a breath held between two people, and then he reached over, fingers brushing lightly against mine. "Me too," he said softly. "I've been out for a while, but it's not often I meet someone who just gets it." That night, as we rode home separately, I caught myself replaying that little moment over and over. It was simple, but it felt huge. A few days later, Lucas invited me to check out the bike shop where he worked. I was nervous at first, walking into a place filled with tools and tech I didn't understand. But Lucas greeted me like I was the most important person there. He introduced me to his coworkers, showed me around, and even let me try my hand at tightening a bolt, which I promptly messed up, but hey, I tried. As the afternoon faded into evening, we ended up sitting on the shop's stoop, sharing a couple of cold sodas and talking about everything from childhood memories to our most embarrassing moments. Lucas told me about how he got into biking after moving to the city, how it helped him cope with feeling uprooted and alone. "I guess that's why I like fixing bikes so much," he said, looking out at the street. "It's like helping people keep moving, even when life tries to throw a wrench in the gears." I looked at him, the grease stains still on his hands from earlier, the tired but happy look in his eyes, and I felt this overwhelming urge to lean in and kiss him. I hesitated, heart pounding. But Lucas beat me to it, his lips soft and warm against mine, and all those nerves melted away. From then on, things felt different. Better. We were no longer just two guys hanging out after work or fixing bikes. We were us. But of course, it wasn't all perfect. There were moments when I felt unsure. Like when I caught myself wondering if Lucas really liked me, or if I was just some distraction from his busy life. One night, after a particularly long day at the shop, he canceled our plans last minute, and I couldn't help but feel that familiar sting of disappointment. I didn't say anything at first. Instead, I texted him, trying to sound casual, but inside I was spiraling. When we finally met again a couple of days later, I blurted out, "Are you sure you want to do this? I mean, us?" Lucas looked taken aback, then reached out and took my hand. "Jake, I do. It's just, sometimes work gets crazy, and I'm not always great at balancing everything." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my chest just hearing him say it. "I get it. I just don't want to lose this." "You won't," he promised, squeezing my hand. And that was the thing about Lucas. He wasn't perfect, and neither was I, but we were figuring it out together. A couple of weeks ago, we decided to do that charity ride Lucas had mentioned on our first coffee date. It was early morning, and the city was still waking up as a crowd of cyclists gathered at the starting point. I was nervous again, riding with experienced bikers, worried I'd slow everyone down. But Lucas stayed by my side, encouraging me every mile. By the time we crossed the finish line, I was exhausted, but exhilarated. Lucas pulled me into a sweaty hug, laughing breathlessly, and I realized how much I'd come to rely on him, not just for bike repairs, but for everything. That night, after we'd cleaned up and were sitting on my couch, Lucas pulled out a little notebook he'd been carrying around. "I've been working on this," he said, flipping it open to reveal sketches of bikes, routes, and notes. "I'm thinking about starting my own custom bike business." I looked at him, amazed. "That's really cool." He smiled shyly. "It's scary, but I want to try." I reached over and took his hand again. "You've got this, and I'll be here to cheer you on." Lucas looked up at me, eyes shining, and without thinking twice, I leaned in and kissed him. This time, no distractions, no interruptions, just us. That's when I knew. This was more than just a bike fix or a casual coffee. This was the start of something real, something worth the grease stains, the nervous laughs, and all the unexpected moments in between. After that night, things between Lucas and me settled into this comfortable rhythm, but like with any relationship, the real test came when life started throwing curveballs. For me, it was a big project at work that had me pulling late nights, staring at spreadsheets, and trying to make sense of numbers that refused to add up. For Lucas, it was the looming pressure of deciding whether to actually take the leap and start that custom bike business he'd been sketching out for months. One Friday, after an especially brutal week, I was dragging myself into the bike shop to see Lucas. I just needed a break, some time away from my own stress. The shop smelled like grease and rubber tires, and there he was, kneeling over a vintage frame, hands covered in oil, focused but looking a little more tired than usual. "Hey," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. Lucas looked up and smiled, but I could tell the smile was a little forced. "Hey, you're here late." "Yeah, work's been a nightmare. Thought I'd come find my favorite bike mechanic." He chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag. "Well, lucky for you, I'm here. What's going on?" I shrugged, feeling the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. "Honestly, I don't know. I'm overwhelmed, and I'm worried about you too. This whole business thing, it's a lot." Lucas sighed, sitting back on his heels. "It is. I'm scared, Jake. Starting something from scratch feels like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there's water down there." I nodded, understanding that fear more than I wanted to admit. "But sometimes you have to jump to see if you can fly." He looked at me, eyes shining with something like hope. "Yeah, maybe." That night, we didn't rush to fix anything. No bikes, no problems, just us. We talked about fears and dreams, about what-ifs, and maybe some days. It was honest, messy, and exactly what I needed. The next week, Lucas surprised me. He'd taken a part-time job at a local cafe to help fund his business plans. When he told me, I was proud but also worried he was stretching himself too thin. "I'm managing. He insisted one evening when I expressed concern. And besides, I want to prove to myself I can do this. I reached out and squeezed his hand. You're already proving a lot. But the juggling act took a toll. There were nights Lucas showed up too exhausted to smile, mornings when I found texts from him apologizing for canceling plans. I wanted to be supportive, but sometimes I felt like I was losing him to his own ambitions. One Saturday, I decided to surprise him at the cafe. When I walked in, he was behind the counter, taking orders with that same spark in his eyes. But when he saw me, his face lit up in a way that melted away all my worries. Jake. What are you doing here? Just thought you could use a break, I said, sliding onto a stool. He laughed, shaking his head. You always know when to show up. We ended up stealing a few stolen moments between customers, sharing quiet smiles and quick touches. Watching him work so hard made me admire him even more. Weeks passed, and the business idea started to take shape. Lucas got a small loan, found a tiny workshop space, and began building custom bikes for friends and local riders. I threw myself into supporting him, helping with social media, attending local bike fairs, and even learning a bit about repairs so I could hold my own. Our relationship grew in these small, steady ways. We weren't perfect. There were arguments about time and priorities, moments when stress got the best of us, but we always came back to each other. One night, after a long day, Lucas invited me over to his workshop. The space smelled like metal and paint, and in the center was a bike that looked like a work of art. This is it, he said, voice full of pride. My first official custom build. I ran my hand over the sleek frame, feeling the craftsmanship and care. It's incredible. He stepped closer, brushing a stray hair from my forehead. I couldn't have done it without you. I smiled, heart full. We did it together, and as we leaned in, the world outside fading away, I realized that sometimes the best kind of love is the one that's built, bit by bit, with patience, grease, and a whole lot of heart. After that night in the workshop, something shifted between Lucas and me. It was subtle, like the way the air feels just a little warmer before a summer storm, but I could feel it creeping in. Life was getting busier. His custom bike business was attracting more attention, which was amazing, but it meant longer hours and less downtime. Meanwhile, my job was no less demanding, and the exhaustion was starting to wear on both of us. One Thursday evening, I showed up at his place after work, carrying a pizza and a six-pack, hoping for something low-key. When I stepped inside, the place was a mess. A jumble of bike parts, tools scattered across the floor, and half-assembled frames leaning against the walls. Lucas was in the middle of it all, sleeves rolled up, smudges of grease on his face and hands. Hey, I said, setting down the pizza on the kitchen counter. He looked up, a tired but genuine smile crossing his face. Hey yourself. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over and plopped down next to him on the couch, careful not to disturb the pile of magazines and bike catalogs stacked nearby. How's it going? I asked, trying to sound casual. Lucas sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Honestly, it's overwhelming. I love it, but sometimes I feel like I'm drowning. Trying to keep up with orders, marketing, and all the admin stuff, it's a lot for one person. I nodded because I knew that feeling well. Maybe you should think about getting some help? Hiring someone part-time even. He shook his head. I've thought about it, but it's not that simple. I want to keep control, make sure everything's exactly how I want it. I could see the passion in his eyes, but also the exhaustion lurking beneath. Just don't forget to take care of yourself, okay? You can't pour from an empty cup. Lucas looked at me, and for a moment, I caught something unspoken between us, a mix of gratitude and something deeper, maybe fear. I'm glad you're here, he said quietly. I don't think I'd manage without you. That hit me harder than I expected. Here was this guy, the one who'd come into my life greasy and smiling, now trusting me with his fears and dreams. The next couple of weeks were a blur of late nights and early mornings. Lucas's workshop became a second home for me. I found myself there more often than not, helping with everything from packing orders to brainstorming marketing ideas. Even if I wasn't the bike expert, I was his biggest cheerleader. One Saturday morning, Lucas and I decided to take a break and go for a ride along the river path. The sun was shining, and the city felt alive in a way that made me forget about deadlines and to-do lists. We rode side by side, the wind whipping through our hair, laughing at some ridiculous joke Lucas made about his own mechanical disaster moments. It felt easy, like a breath of fresh air. When we stopped at a little cafe halfway through the ride, Lucas leaned back on the bench, looking at me with a softness that made my stomach flip. "You know," he started, hesitation in his voice. "I've been thinking about us." I swallowed, suddenly nervous. "What about us?" He smiled, fingers tracing lazy circles on his knee. "I want to take this somewhere. More serious. I know we're both busy, and it's not always perfect, but I really like you, Jake." I felt my heart swell. "I like you too, Lucas." More than I expected. He reached over, taking my hand gently. "So, what do you say? Want to be my boyfriend?" "Officially?" I laughed, a mix of relief and happiness flooding through me. "Yeah, I'd like that." That night, lying in bed, I found myself thinking about how far we'd come, from a greasy bike rescue in the park to this moment where hope felt tangible and real. But life, as it tends to do, doesn't pause for perfect moments. A few days later, Lucas called me, sounding frazzled. "Jake, I need your help. Something's come up with one of the custom bikes. I think there's a problem with the brakes, and it's urgent." I dropped everything and headed over to the workshop. When I arrived, Lucas was hunched over the bike, frustration and worry pulling at his features. "This client is really upset," he explained. "If I don't fix this quickly, it could ruin my reputation." I watched as he worked, hands steady despite the tension. I wanted to say something encouraging, but words felt useless. After a couple of hours, the brake issue was resolved, but the stress lingered. Lucas sighed, finally collapsing into a chair. "I'm sorry you had to see me like this." I shook my head. "Hey, you're allowed to be human. That's part of why I'm here." He looked at me, eyes softening. "Thanks, Jake." Seriously. In that moment, I realized that love wasn't always about grand gestures or perfect days. Sometimes it was about showing up when things were messy, about being the grease on the wheels when life tried to slow you down. And as we sat there, tired but together, I knew that no matter what came next, we'd face it side by side. That night, after Lucas and I finally sat down in the quiet of his workshop, the weight of everything we'd been juggling seemed to settle, if only for a moment. I could see the exhaustion in his eyes, but also this fierce determination that had me hooked from the start. I wanted to be his anchor, even when the storm was raging. We sat there in silence for a while, the hum of the city outside barely reaching us. Then, Lucas surprised me by pulling out a small notebook from under a stack of bike parts. The pages were filled with sketches and notes, but also little scribbled plans for the future. "I've been thinking," he said softly, flipping through the pages, "about expanding the shop. Maybe even opening a space downtown, somewhere bigger." I looked at the drawings. Custom bike designs, layouts for the shop, ideas for community workshops. It was ambitious, maybe even a bit reckless, but seeing his passion there made me want to be part of it all. "That sounds amazing," I said, "but also a lot." Lucas nodded. "Yeah, it's scary, but I feel like this is the right time." I reached out and took his hand, this time with no hesitation. "You're not alone in this. Whatever you need, I'm here." He smiled, that tired but genuine smile that made everything feel okay. "Thanks, Jake. That means a lot." The weeks that followed were a blend of chaos and hope. Lucas poured himself into the dream, balancing orders, meeting with potential investors, and late-night brainstorming sessions. I did my best to support him, even when my own work was demanding more than usual. One evening, we were sitting on the rooftop of my apartment building, overlooking the city lights. Lucas had his arm around me, and for the first time in a while, I felt like we could just breathe. "Do you ever get scared?" I asked, breaking the comfortable silence. He chuckled softly. "All the time, but it's the kind of fear that pushes you forward, you know?" I nodded, leaning into him. "I'm scared too, of losing this, of messing up, but I don't want to stop trying." He kissed the top of my head. Neither do I. Then came the day Lucas had been waiting for, the meeting with a potential investor who could help fund the expansion. I was with him, sitting in the small conference room, watching as he pitched his vision with passion and conviction. He was nervous, sure, but that spark of confidence shone through. After the meeting, we walked out into the afternoon sun, the city buzzing around us. "So?" I asked, trying to hide my own nerves. Lucas grinned. "They want to back me. It's happening." I wanted to cheer, to jump up and down, but instead, I just pulled him into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." He laughed, breathless. "Couldn't have done it without you." But just as things seemed to be falling into place, life threw us another curveball. Lucas got a call from one of his suppliers. There was a delay in shipments, which meant he'd have to push back the launch date. The frustration was written all over his face when he told me. "It's like one step forward, 2 steps back," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. I wrapped my arms around him, holding on tight. "We'll figure it out. We always do." That night, as we sat together in the dim light of the workshop, I realized just how much this was more than a business or a relationship. It was a partnership. 2 people navigating the messy, unpredictable ride together. And no matter the grease, the late nights, or the setbacks, I wouldn't have it any other way. Months passed, and slowly but surely, Lucas's dream took shape. The supplier issues got resolved, the new workshop space downtown was secured, and the buzz around his custom bikes grew louder. Watching him build his business piece by piece was like watching someone shape their own future with hands that never gave up, even when they were tired and smeared with grease. One crisp Saturday morning, Lucas invited me to the grand opening of the new shop. Standing there among the racks of gleaming bikes and curious customers, I felt proud in a way I hadn't expected. This wasn't just a celebration of his success, it was a celebration of us, of how we'd navigated the messy in-between moments, the doubts and the late-night talks, the small victories and the setbacks. Lucas caught my eye from across the room, his smile the same one that had first caught me in that park months ago. He walked over, hands still a little stained from setting up the last displays, and slipped his hand into mine. The familiar warmth spread through me, steady and comforting. "Jake," he said quietly, "thanks for sticking by me, for believing in me and us." I squeezed his hand. I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Later, as the crowd thinned and the sun dipped low, Lucas and I found ourselves alone in the quiet shop. He pulled me close, the gentle way he held me saying everything words couldn't. "It's crazy, isn't it?" he murmured. How a broken bike in the park turned into all this. I laughed softly, thinking back to that first moment. The grease on his hands, the unexpected invitation, the way everything changed. "Yeah," I said. "Sometimes the best things come from the messiest moments." We stayed there for a while, simply holding each other, the hum of the city outside fading to a peaceful backdrop. I realized then that love, like a bike, needs care and patience. Sometimes it needs fixing, sometimes it needs a push, but with the right person, it's the ride worth taking. And as we stepped outside together, hand in hand, I felt ready for whatever lay ahead, grease stains, setbacks, and all, because we were facing it together.